It's a great pleasure to introduce Bruce Alberts, and he asked me to keep it short. Professor Emeritus of Biochemistry and Biophysics at the University of California, San Francisco. As a scientist, Bruce's laboratory has made fundamental and important discoveries in DNA replication, morphogens, Drosophil development, cytoskeleton, ranging biochemistry to cell biology. He's also one of the great world leaders of science, having served 2 terms as president of the National Academy of Sciences. He was an editor-in-chief of Science magazine, president of the American Society for Cell Biology, United States Science Envoy, and current member or chair of over 60 nonprofit boards, all dedicated one way or another to science and science education. Bruce, as somebody who knows him well, called him a grand old man of science, who's also dedicated his career to improving science education, promoting science as a tool for international diplomacy, and infusing the non-scientific world with scientific thinking and values. Since 1983, he's also dedicated an amazing effort in producing Molecular Biology of the Cell, one of the great cell biology textbooks used in universities around the world. He travels around the world and is, for instance, a Science Envoy instituted in Indonesia, Indonesian Frontiers of Science, to bring scientists together from Indonesia and the United States. So he does a tremendous amount on an international level. In addition to his incredible scientific abilities and abilities to bring people together from all different walks of life in the world, Bruce is also an incredible human being. And it's hard to know that unless you interact with him, but to give you a little anecdote, is that when we were in his laboratory, we saw his schedule one day in which he had a luncheon meeting with then the First Lady Hillary Clinton. And at the same time, I don't know if he knows this, he actually shared an elevator ride with a lonely student from the UCSF pharmacy program. And he spent 5 minutes with her learning about all the strengths and weaknesses of the pharmacy program at UCSF. I got a call later that evening from my cousin, who it was he's talked to, said, the man is amazing. I mean, he just actually spent 5 minutes with her, just very humble, very intelligent, and very dedicated to making the world a better place through science. So it's a great honor and privilege to introduce Bruce Alberts to you.
Well, thank you, Ralphie. It's a real pleasure to be back again. University of California, where I've been on one of the campuses, UCSF, for now, ever since 1976. And I've also worked a lot trying to improve science education in the state of California, which is part of the reason why I'm giving this talk. It's been a frustrating task, and it needs to involve all of us. So, just to back up a bit, all of life is an education, and I received a major education as president of the National Academy of Sciences in Washington. That was a full-time job. Had to close my laboratory. In fact, Rafi had gotten there only shortly before I left. So that experience was profound. It made me realize that science and scientists must achieve a much higher position in society, both in every nation and in the world. Otherwise, we're going to be in a big mess. And in particular, I learned visits to India about Prime Minister Nehru's founding of that first democracy in India, the independent country. He emphasized the need for a scientific temper for any diverse democracy, and I would say for any diverse world. Everybody needs much more of the creativity, rationality, openness, and tolerance that are inherent to science. And just have to listen to talk radio in the United States or see what some of the politicians are saying to realize how crucial that is. So this is the image we want for science. This is a picture taken on the front lawn of the National Academy of Sciences on the lap of Albert Einstein. This very rumpled statue has a wonderful accessible lap, and all the students who come to Washington for a week with their schools generally take their class picture at the end on this statue. Unfortunately, this is not the image we now have for science, and we all must work to change that. Here's one disturbing recent fact I learned after giving one of these talks like this at the University of Wisconsin. A third grade student of one of the people in the audience came home from school and told his mother, "Now I get it, science is just like spelling. You just need to memorize it and it doesn't make any sense." And if you look at what your children, your grandchildren are doing in school all too often, you could agree with them. I mean, agree with that interpretation. The second disturbing fact is when focus groups were done by the National Academy of Sciences in preparation for their every 10-year renewal of this document they produce for school boards called Creationism and Science and the Nature of Science and Evolution. We discovered that many adults, these are all college-educated adults who presumably taken one science course in college, at least, these adults felt that science is what scientists believe. You could believe it or not. It's just, and religion is what preachers believe, and you just take your choice of how you want to think the universe began and how the world works. So this is what science should look like at school. These are a bunch of 12-year-olds in San Francisco quite a while ago when we had a very effective, active science teaching in middle schools. Basically, the kids work in groups of 4, noisy classrooms. The teacher there in the back is walking around like a coach. This is a kind of science teaching we should have. It's not the science teaching we actually have in most parts of the United States, including most parts of California. Here's a piece of curriculum for kindergartners that was actually the curriculum in San Francisco when I left in 1993, the official curriculum for first year of school for kindergartens. I show this slide to make people aware of what science education can be, even for 5-year-olds. Basically, at the right time of year when there are seeds on the ground, the kids put on white socks and walk around the schoolyard or in the park under trees. You come back, and of course, since seeds evolved to stick to animal furs, they will stick to socks, but so will a lot of other things. And the job is to figure out which of the black specks on their socks are seeds and which are dirt. And they're given a little $3 microscope, and the first thing they do is they look at each of the specks that they picked off with a forceps from their sock, put them each in a numbered square, and draw a picture of what they look like. And then the teacher does not tell them any of the answers. These 5-year-olds have to come up with an idea which are seeds and which are dirt, and student will eventually in that class suggest that maybe the regular shaped ones are the seeds. And then the teacher doesn't say that's the right answer. She says, well, what do the rest of you think? You know, it takes time to teach this way. The kids have to think, and eventually the class agrees this is a reasonable idea, and then, you know, a few days later they discuss how you might test that idea, and again, the teacher doesn't tell them. Some kid eventually comes up with the idea that you could plant both sets of seeds and see if our hypothesis, our idea is correct. So this just demonstrates that even for the youngest kids in school, you could actually train them to think like scientists. So the envision is to have an education like this in every year of school. Of course, the tasks get more difficult as the kids get older. We have such curricula that would, in fact, post-Sputnik, the U.S. was a leader in developing this kind of active science learning. So my hypothesis and belief is that if we every kid learned how to solve these kinds of problems, they would be more effective human beings. And most importantly, they'd be able to make wise judgments for their family, their community, and their nation. They wouldn't be fooled by every scam, by every politician who wants their vote. So what I learned at the academy was this. Because when I came to the academy, I was offered the job. I didn't really want to close my lab, but in 1993 they said if I took this job, I could use the academy to focus on science education, and we were in the middle of doing the National Science Education Standards. I was on that committee, and I tried to use the academy to work on this national problem of improving science education, and many of my members would say, you know, this is not a proper use of the academy. It's not the job of academics, it's the job of school teachers and school boards. But what I actually learned was the major barrier to change is actually us. Those in the academy, those at universities who teach science. This is a little diagram from an early academy publication just showing the network with all these arrows pointing at the poor teachers. Actually, my daughter is a science teacher, so I know that this is true. You have the textbook publishers, these high-stakes exams with multiple choice questions. You have unions, you have all kinds of things. But here are the people here. The Faculty of Arts and Science, they teach the future teachers and they teach the future parents what is science. What is science education? And if we define science education in the college level as active learning and understanding what science is, learning to think like a scientist, like those 5-year-olds were beginning to do, then of course the teachers will be able to teach that way. But currently, most teachers have never learned that way, and they need complete retraining in order to teach active learning of the kind I showed you for 5-year-olds. So to show that it's possible, I'm showing this picture from the University of Minnesota. I actually was a site visitor for this program, so I learned about the fact that Robin Wright and her colleagues at University of Minnesota teach now all their first-year biology class in these kinds of classrooms. This classroom has some 200 students sitting around 22 tables. Each table has 2 computers connected to the internet and an overhead screen that can be used to put whatever's on that computer up on for everyone to see. And the teacher here, this is Robin Wright with this, I put a star on her back, it wasn't actually there. Unfortunately, she's facing the wrong way. But anyway, she could throw a switch and put what's on any one computer on everybody's screen. And the teacher in this case is just like that teacher in the 12-year-old class. She's walking around the class, helping the kids deal with problem solving. In this case, using web resources, learning how to find information for yourself. So this is just another picture of that classroom. And they have now built a new science building. I give the administration a tremendous amount of credit for building a new science building. And the University of Minnesota has 17 flat classrooms like this with these tables. So the good news is this type of science education precisely fits the needs for workforce skills that have been widely expressed by U.S. business and industry. This is just an example of from a book called Thinking for a Living, where these authors interviewed all these HR departments of countries, of companies. Companies are frustrated because they want to hire people who have the ability to use abstract conceptual thinking to apply them to complex real world problems, including problems that involve the use of scientific and technical knowledge that are non-standard, full of ambiguities, and have more than one right answer. This is critical. Is education learning the right answers to questions? Are we training kids for a quiz show, or are we training them to be able to function effectively in both the world of work and in their role as citizens? There's also bad news, of course, otherwise I wouldn't be giving this talk. Adults have incorrectly defined what science education means for more students, and here's an example from the SAT-2 biology subject test. This is a cram book. We'll show you don't really have to understand anything. You just have to make a couple of simple associations like these. Aerobic respiration with presence of oxygen, more ATP produced. Anaerobic respiration with absence of oxygen, less ATP produced. When we get through, you may not really understand much, but you don't have to, and we'll prove it. So this is a high-stakes exam. You get kids into college, and this is created by adults. And so we're misdefining the whole education system. And I'll give you another example. It's sad. It's easy to find these examples. Very sad. Of course, I'm a cell biologist now. I started as a chemist, but now I'm a cell biologist. Middle school students should come in contact with real cells and learn how amazing they are. They're really the most amazing thing on the earth, just the simplest living cell. But instead we try to fill their heads with all the names and parts of their processes. I call this science education as mentioning. This is from a 7th grade life sciences textbook, which has these bold words which tell you what's important. And this says, running through the cell is a network of flat channels called the endoplasmic reticulum. Well, I had never heard of the endoplasmic reticulum until I had to write a textbook, and I was already, professor. This organelle manufactures stores, and transports materials. And then on the next paragraph was a similar sentence about the Golgi apparatus, also a bold word. And so you have these 7th grade textbooks with 500-word glossaries to memorize these parts of cells and everything else. And just to show the students that what's important about education, there's a chapter self-test. At the end of that chapter, it says, write a sentence that uses the term endoplasmic reticulum correctly. They've only had one sentence. So is it any wonder that when I'm teaching first-year medical students at UCSF, these highly selected best students from UCSD and everywhere else, we get terrific students, we get the impression that, pushback, just tell us what to memorize. We don't need to understand anything. Just tell us what to memorize. This is crazy. So just to drive the nail in the coffin, this is the high-stakes 5th grade California sample test question and all this No Child Left Behind stuff that's really damaged U.S. education. So here's one of the actual questions. A scientist needs to take a picture of the well-ordered arrangements of the atoms and molecules within a substance. Which of the following instruments would be best for the science to use? They give you a choice of 4. Now, of course, there is no right answer because the electron microscope can't really resolve that. But even if there was a right answer, who cares? Will they know all these names of these instruments? That is not science education. Remember, these are 5th graders. So a critical challenge today is that it's much easier to test for science words than for science understanding and abilities. And bad tests are forcing a trivialization of science education, driving most students away from science, my grandchildren included. This week's experiment, sponsored by the Gordon Betty Moore Foundation, where I'm a trustee, and I've been actively involved with this, starting on Friday and Saturday, we're bringing together leading scientists, in fact, 3 Nobel Prize winners, plus the best people in the country who are experts in science assessment, to try to ask the question, can outstanding scientists contribute to producing science tests that measure what is important for students to learn rather than that what is easy to measure? This needs to be a critical thing because we learned from the last decade of No Child Left Behind that what's tested for is what's taught. And if we're testing for memorizing stethoscope and seismograph and things like that, that's what teachers will teach. So most of all, we need to make a science out of science education. That is, treat education the way we treat science. Use evidence to make decisions. So education is as important as health, but we treat the two completely differently. This is just some evidence about what the California State Education Board has done in the past, the California State School Board. For example, in 1987, the school board voted to ban the use of phonics for teaching reading. And that lasted for nearly a decade before research showed what a mistake that was. I mean, these crazy top-down decisions. So this happens all the time in education. So instead of flying blind, we need to use knowledge of what increases student learning based on scientifically obtained evidence to create a continuously improving education system at all levels. The same kind of thing we do for medicine. We just don't, hopefully, just make decisions on what kind of treatments to give people based on what people believe. That was the pre-scientific era of medicine. So this will require a much more focused and effective system of education research. Otherwise, we won't have the background knowledge that we need to counteract politicians who think they have all the right answers. Every new school superintendent who comes in is going to fix the problem and change everything in the next 2 years, and then they're out. And in big cities, school systems, the superintendent, much a political job as anything else. So the Academy, when I was there, I said we tried to work on education. We published some 150 education reports. This is one of the most successful ones, called How People Learn, Brain, Mind, Experience in School. It looked at what had been learned in psychology departments about the nature of learning, and then tried to apply that to schools. And this was some of these scientific evidence for active learning has been displayed in this very influential book, which is widely used for pre-college, for pre-teacher education in many places. And then we had this report, a series of reports called the Strategic Education Research Partnership. And this was 2 successive committees made up of leaders from industry, school systems, education research, a very high profile effort. And the major question the committee was supposed to ask was, why has research supported innovation and continuous improvement in medicine, agriculture, and transportation, but not in education, and what can we do about it? And I'm going to oversimplify. The answer is that, part of the answer is that education is missing the equivalent of the teaching hospital in medicine, that is so-called field sites, places where researchers, teachers, and designers work in practice settings in real schools to define problems and test solutions in context and evaluate practice as a source of new knowledge. Much of the problem in education research world was deemed to be that what the research projects were done in artificial laboratory systems working on problems that the researchers defined, and SERP said you have to go work in real schools, set up field sites, and try to answer the urgent problems of that school district in a real world setting. So the first SERP Field Site was set up in Boston because the superintendent of schools in Boston, Tom Pesant, was a member of the committee. And the focus was something called middle school literacy, which I had never heard of. And basically, Boston discovered, and many others have discovered the same thing, that students drop out of high school. And one of the major reasons why they drop out of high school in the first year is that they don't understand they can't understand the textbooks. And the basic fact is that traditionally we stopped teaching reading at 4th grade because that's when you could start decoding. You could read the workbook, and a student can, these high school students who were dropping out could take the textbook and read the words to you, but they didn't really understand what it meant. And so basically the SERP team had to figure out why can't they understand what they're reading. And we had to design interventions to try to make that make a difference so that this would not be the case in the future. So this led to the recognition that one of the major problems of reading for comprehension, kids don't know a whole bunch of words that are common in textbooks called academic language. Nobody uses it in their homes. They don't use it when they're talking to their fellow students. Words like analyze, for example. They're just very common words like this when we try to write books for high school levels. And so that led to a project called Word Generation, which was SERP's first free products, and there's a wonderful website with all this up on it. I'll give you the link in a second. But the idea is to create open source curricula that can be used, and this Word Generation has been a big success. It's being widely used around the country. So the basic idea is to have a series of lessons, 15-minute basic debates And they target every week 5 different words of academic language that are not used at home. And this week it was whereas, capable, ongoing, compatible, and notion. There's some website has all these wonderful videos of these outstanding teachers actually teaching this way to help other teachers use it. And this is an example of some of the, so each lesson is a debate on wiretapping. There's one about, I don't think it's up here. One of the questions that they debate, should you be required to get a license before you could have a baby? things that students are interested in, and yet, and then part of this was the second field site was San Francisco, where I live, and I used to try to go to these meetings. They had frequent design team meetings where half the people in the room were graduate students and professors of education or science from Berkeley, Stanford, UCSF, and the other half of the people were from the school district, people with responsibility for curriculum and teaching. And the people from the school district were so appreciative of the fact that they could think long-term for a change, because they're always putting out fires. And the people from academia were appreciative of the fact that maybe what they actually had learned throughout their life of being a professor could actually be useful and have some effect in real-world schools. So this has been a very successful project, now 10 years old, and this is the website with lots of resources, not only in literacy, but also some in science and math. Okay, there's also the critical issue of empowering teachers. My daughter is a science teacher in a public school in San Francisco. I've interacted for many years with outstanding science teachers in San Francisco schools and other schools. And a sad fact is that U.S. industry learned a long time ago from the Japanese that building a better automobile requires listening to workers on the assembly line. Otherwise, you can't make a good product. And this has been spread through all of U.S. industry. You know, every marketing department of every company feeds back information from the customers. And education is one of the few parts of our society that has failed to exploit this fact. This is what keeps me up at night. Our best science teachers need to have much more influence on the education system. We have a top-down education system in most places that you wouldn't want to work in an environment that when you had a good idea, there was no way to get it implemented. And so, of course, after a while, you'd leave. And the main reason why people leave teaching is not because of the salaries, but because of the environment that they have to work in. So we need to work to empower our best teachers to have influence on what actually happens in their life of work. So when I was at the academy, it took me a long time to recognize this, because I kept on putting, the academy president has absolute power for one thing. You approve of every committee that does a study. So if I got any committee that was going to study something in education, we had 150 such studies when I was there, I'd send it back to put more teachers on it. And so we'd have outstanding teachers on our committees, maybe 4 teachers, but there'd be 10 academics plus the 4 teachers. And it took me a long time to recognize that the teacher's voice was not being adequately heard, because the academics are used to committees and the teachers were not being influential enough. So we set up, after about 8 years, we set up a national teacher advisory council, some of the best teachers. This is the same Einstein statue again. This is a group of teachers that rotate every 3 years to try to inform every study that's done in the academy in education what the teacher's voice, what the teacher knows. Since that time, a California Teacher Advisory Council was established in Sacramento. It's run by the California Council on Science and Technology, which is a sort of a state version of the National Academies where I worked. And it makes connections to legislatures and education leaders in Sacramento. We also need a similar expert teacher group in each school district, because you know, education is as complicated as cell biology. It's really not a simple thing to educate children. And teachers, our best teachers, are really experts in how to make the system work better. Okay, I'm now going to shift to my life at Science Magazine. So from 5 years, I was editor-in-chief of Science Magazine. I thought I was retired, actually, and I was happy at UCSF teaching graduate students cell biology. And then I got a call from a recruiter, one of these search firms, saying they're looking for an editor-in-chief of Science Magazine. I said, I'm not interested, and I suggested a bunch of names of younger people. Then eventually I got a call offering me the job. And just like they did in the academy, they did the same trick. If I took this job, I could use it to promote science education. They knew I was a sucker for such a statement. So I did it for 5 years. And it was great to have control of the editorial page. We had lots of editorials on science by me and others talking about teaching real science. And then we had a series of contests over the course of 4 years. The first contest was 24, well, we had one winner a month published on the best free science education websites. This recognizes the fact that there's wonderful things on the web, but nobody knows where they are. And there's huge amounts of good things and huge amounts of mediocre things. So we now have selected 24 websites, and each one had a 2-page article explaining what that website was good for, so you didn't have to go to the website unless you thought it would be useful for what you were doing. We followed that with an even more relevant contest to this audience. What are the best college inquiry-based active learning teaching modules that have been developed? Because of the way we judged it, it had to be in English, so we didn't survey everybody in the world. We have had 24 winners of this IBI College Science Prize, and they've also been published, two pages on each one. This is the first one we published. Each one has an electronic supplement with all the instructions you need to actually teach that set of laboratories or non-laboratory course. At any rate, to qualify, you had to have done this for several years and show that it can be transferred, not that it simply can be done in one place. We also had lots of special issues on 4 of them on science education. The last one was called Grand Challenges in Science Education, which just before I left being editor-in-chief, and they gave me a special prerogative of actually being able to work on it and select authors. And one of my favorite articles is this one by Jim Pellegrino, an expert in science assessment. One of the people who's going to be organizing a meeting starting at the end of this week that the Moore Foundation is sponsoring. And this is a wonderful description of the problems and challenges in creating good science tests. It's just a 4-page article, easy to read. If you're interested, I think I'd recommend it. Another major project was based on the fact that we now want in the United States, through the next generation science standards, which have been adopted by California, Oregon, Washington, many other states. But basically, every student is to engage in a critical reading of primary scientific literature with the aim of understanding how science works and what science is. Just think about that first slide I showed about these adults, college-educated adults. They couldn't see any difference between what religious leaders say and what scientific leaders say about, for example, the evolutionary processes on Earth. Basically, they're just 2 different belief systems. Well, if you've actually read a scientific paper and read it in a way that focuses on understanding how science works and how scientific knowledge is built up, you couldn't equate those two ways of looking at the world. Let's have a project called Science in the Classroom. It's a collection of annotated research papers from Science Magazine, plus teaching materials. And the aim is to help students understand the nature of professional scientific research. Currently, 8 science papers have been annotated and are ready for use in the classroom, and more are coming up soon. One of your faculty just told me she has one coming up next week. And what does it mean to annotate them? Well, we work back and forth with teachers on all this, many iterations. Basically, there's this side panel called a learning lens, which allows you to, if you click on glossary, then these green boxes come up all throughout the article. And I should stress that this is the actual article. It's not revised, the actual article. And of course, we choose articles that are appropriate. This is one on this emerging disease causing bats to die across America. We don't choose quantum mechanics and things like that. So basically, you can turn on the glossary, and then when you mouse over that word, it will define it. Because one of the problems in understanding scientific papers is all the language. You could also click on previous work, conclusions, authors' experiments, and so on. Now, the figures are important parts of every paper, and they're often difficult. So the figures have been expanded with the addition of further explanations for each part of the figure. And then, of course, to understand how science works, you have to see how it builds on previous work or contradicts previous work. And so the references have been annotated to explain why the author referred to those references. And there's this red toolbar across the bottom that allows you to download a PDF or whatever, but also allows you to connect to the news articles in Science Magazine on the same topic. So you can connect this scientific article to things that the kids read about in their newspaper, real problems. And of course, the whole emphasis is on thinking about science, not about facts. You know, why is this study important? What was its objective? What is the supporting evidence, and so on. And there's a special teachers section where the teacher's guide. And the authors of these papers have been wonderful in being enthusiastically supporting this, and they've, in many cases, given us videos or data, in fact, to analyze if you want to extend and try to look at their original data and assign real science work to some of the students. And I want to emphasize this is all open access at this this website, which I'll put that slide up at the end, so if you want to be able to find it. So I now want to talk about sort of the amazing power of science education partnerships, because this is also very relevant to UCSD. You live in a big city, lots of students trying to learn science, young people. This university is potentially a great resource for connecting people who would never connect to science, to real science. And UCSF has had, my university, 25-year-old science and education partnership. Each year, scientists, volunteers, mostly students and postdocs, contribute more than 10,000 hours of time. We're active in 90% of San Francisco schools. These are the dots, so where the schools are located. UCSF, the original campus is right there. I'm in Mission Bay, way over there. At any rate, what I've learned about this is the amazing power of these kinds of partnerships. The students who do this, the postdocs, if they spend maybe 4 hours a week on this, I think they're more productive in their research, because research often doesn't work. You're depressed. Can I do anything? You go out in the schools and you realize, interacting with people, you know things that are useful. It makes them more energetic and more able to solve their real problems. And what I've learned about partnerships is that any effective partnership requires that the partners deeply respect and honor each other's unique expertise. We do not allow our scientists into schools without sort of debriefing before they go in about what to do and what not to do. The worst thing is to go and give a lecture that the teacher and the students don't understand, and then the students, you leave and the students try to ask the teacher how to explain what you said, and the teacher feels humiliated and everybody's confused. We have them go in and with doing something in active learning. Our funding agents must work to decrease the strong incentives for everybody unique. And so the best things in education often don't spread because the idea is to get a grant to do education, you have to do something different rather than spreading good things. And then any partnership obviously only works when you're working with a partner on something meaningful. And here I'm talking about something that I've been very interested in getting going, a STEM badge program. So like the merit badges that kids have in middle school for Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, kids who have a particular interest in frogs or astronomy or whatever could actually get into something in depth and get credit for learning something outside of school. So the dream really is this. Can a child's science education serve to impart scientific values? I mentioned that when I started, this idea that scientific temper for the world and for our country is really the crucial thing we have to think about. There's this wonderful book still in print by Jacob Bronowski called Science and Human Values. It's a little paperback. Bronowski was a physicist. During World War II as a young soldier. He flew over Hiroshima and Nagasaki after the bombs had been dropped. That profoundly depressed him. And he spent the next 10 years thinking and writing and reading about whether science on balance was good or bad for the world. And of course, he wrote this powerful defense of science as something good for the world. And this is really his conclusion. The society of scientists is simple because it has a directing purpose to explore the truth. Nevertheless, it has to solve the problem of every society, which is to find a compromise between the individual and the group. It must encourage the single scientist to be independent and the body of scientists to be tolerant. From these basic conditions which form the prime values, there follows step by step a range of values: dissent, freedom of thought and speech, justice, honor, human dignity, and self-respect. Science has humanized our values. Men have asked for freedom, justice, and respect, precisely as the scientific spirit has spread among them. So I would take this as our big mission. We were talking before this, I had met with a bunch of faculty. You know, as faculty at UCSD, what should be our aim for our undergraduate students? I would say your aim should be that nobody leaves here, no matter what their major, without understanding what science is and how it works. And yet, if you actually did a survey now, you'd find that I would bet the majority of your students do not understand what science is or how it works, even if they've taken a so-called science course, perhaps. So without that appreciation for science, we can't expect support for our enterprise to continue in a strong way. And we can't expect our citizens to make the right decisions about issues like global warming or environmental pollution or whatever else it is, where we have to do the right thing, because science really can predict what the future is like. And if our governments don't, because of our citizens, don't pay attention to the long-term implications of what we do today, we're in big trouble. So this is a high-stakes issue that you're involved in. Every faculty member at the University of California who teaches science is part of this effort. It has to be part of that effort. And as I was saying, we were discussing this morning, you know, in science, I would never think of starting to do experiments in some field without reading everything I could find out about what had already been done and building on it. Yet when I started as assistant professor at Princeton, this was 1966, nobody even thought about doing that in education. I just got up there and talked. We now know that lecturing is a relatively ineffective way of teaching from many, many studies, and that most students learn much more effectively from active discussion and inquiry in class, the kind of thing that's happening at the University of Minnesota. There's all kinds of scientific evidence to this effect, some of it published in Science magazine. But how are we going to get our faculties to pay attention to it? That's the question, and that's what we were struggling with. So I told them this story. If this doesn't wake people up, nothing else will. So one of the things that the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, again, this wonderful foundation set up by one of the co-founders of Intel, he gave $6 billion to start this foundation. And one of the things that they sponsored is a series of fellowships, internships at the California State Legislature. It's modeled after the AAAS fellowship that sends highly selected scientists and engineers every year to Washington to work in science policy for our government. Well, the idea was the California State Legislature also needs this kind of scientific connection. So the first year, which was like 6 years ago, they did this competition. They had 180 applications or something like that, interviewed people, selected 10 really talented young scientists and engineers, give them their full salary and support to go for 1 year to Sacramento to work in the state legislature. Then you go to the California State Legislature offering them these 10 people. Now, California is a state that is based on science and technology. And this California State Legislature determines our policy. Well, we were all surprised to find out that initially people didn't know what scientists were good for. Why would I want a scientist? I think they remembered some horrible class they might have had. A big lecture class where they couldn't understand anything and got a D or C or something. But the image of scientists in the California State Legislature was totally inappropriate. What the good news is that, after the first class of 10 had been there for a year, now everybody wanted them. And now this is now the 5th class. Now been 50 of those people in the state legislature. And of the first 40, half of them have been permanently hired in Sacramento. So the fact is, we failed in the state of California to make even our legislature, much less our citizens, aware of the values of science, and most of our people seem to be afraid of scientists anyway. So this is the reason why we all have to change. So I just want to leave you with this website I talked about. Sort of a parting gift when I left science was we were able to put up everything we did in education on an open access website, all our special issues, our editorials, the IBI prize for college science, the SPOR prize for the best websites, all that science in the classroom stuff. So hopefully this will help to, in a small way at least, to spread better science and science teaching across the United States and the world. Thank you.